It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back. This is Ed Opperman with the Opperman Report, private investigator Ed Opperman. We are joined with Rob Horn, who has gotten a hold of a storage locker. As a matter of fact, two storage lockers belonging to Damien Echols and Lori Davis, now Lori Echols. You can find Mr. Horn's eBay site, because he's selling a lot of these items here, on eBay at BKBARN. We also have on the phone with us William Ramsey from William Ramsey Investigations. You can hear his show on Saturday nights, 8 p.m. on Pacific Standard Time. So we have William and we have Rob Horn. Rob Horn, tell us about yourself.
Well, my name is Robert Horn. I go by Rob. I am a veteran from the military. I joined the Marines in 1972, got out in 76, and then joined the Army for the rest of the 21 years that I did in the service. After that, I became a cop, ranger with Park Systems. My last job was with Arizona State Parks as a manager and a cop.
Oh, very interesting.
And I had a pretty good career over the years. Now I'm retired.
And then what happened? You got like Storage Wars, like that TV show. You started buying these storage lockers?
Yeah, we started out in 1999, and we bought a few, and we worked with the people that bought them. So we've been selling on eBay since about 1992. My son he's kind of the quiet, silent partner, but these are his auctions. I'm just helping him with them. We have done this for so long, we're pretty good at it. Anyway, in Texas is where we started out doing that, and we did really good. Got really tired of wrapping packages because we were doing 300 and 400 books a week, and or items. It wasn't just books; it was everything. And so I got burned out. And when I finally left that job, I kind of stopped for a few years.
How did you come across? Right. How did you come across these lockers here belonging to the convicted murderer Damien Echols?
We went up to what is the name of the town? Oh yeah, Little Rock, Arkansas, and we were going to a storage unit auction where people had defaulted on their storage units, and we come across one. It was full of books, and I thought to myself that would be really cool. And I told my son that I kind of like that. My wife loves selling books too, and so we put a bid of $50 on it. Yeah, we just figured it was books. Nobody else wanted it, so we got it, and it turned out to be just what you said, a gold mine. Took us about 3 days to figure out that it was all these letters were from supermax, and we looked up Damien Echols' name, and once we realized what it was, it became pretty interesting. I called Channel 5 News in West Memphis, and what was that lady's name?
Janice.
Yeah, Janice. I forget her last name. Anyway, Janice at Channel 5, and she came out that day and interviewed us, and that really helped because we got lots of calls and messages and emails from people wanting to buy this stuff just outright. But we said no, we didn't sell anything outright. It all went on eBay, and that's what we've been continuing to do, just selling on eBay.
Now, when did you come in possession of this stuff? How long ago?
Right, probably the 1st of July, a little bit, maybe the 31st or the 30th of the month prior. So July 1st is probably when we got started good.
Now since you've come in, now how did you come into possession of the second locker?
Second locker was kind of weird. I got an email from a fellow that said, hey, I bought a storage locker that belonged to Damien Echols 4 months prior to me buying that one. And he said he wanted to sell it. He said, oh, my wife is pregnant with twins, and I just don't have time to mess with it. And I said, well, I was interested. And it took us about 3 to 4 weeks to finally get together on it because he was really kind of rough about getting back to me in the emails when I'd email him. But we finally ended up with it and brought it back after the first month of the first locker, which we had sold most everything in it by then. And now we're working on the last of the items in the second locker we got. And by the way, the second locker had way more stuff in it than the first one.
And do you know how much Echols owed on these lockers that caused them to go into default?
Well, usually the rules are they start sending them letters after they're 3 months behind, and then they have their rules in the state that they have to abide by. They send it to them in certified mail and say you got to pay by a certain time, and if it doesn't happen, then they can sell it.
So what'd you pay for the second locker?
That was a little more pricey. I paid $1,600.
Ooh, okay, all right, it's okay. Now, since you've discovered that this belongs to this convicted child killer, have you gone and watched the documentaries, Paradise Lost, and this kind of stuff to kind of get some background on what happened?
We sure did. My wife is an avid reader, so she read some of the books, and we watched, I think, three of the movies that came out. The first one, and that pretty much portrayed him as the guy that killed him. I think that was how it worked. And the second two were always not guilty.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, as an ex-cop, what is your take on all this?
You know, I kind of reserved judgment. For a good long while, I thought, well, if they didn't have DNA evidence, then he might have got a raw deal. But after I got a hold of the second locker and I saw the reading material that he read, I'm thoroughly convinced that he probably was guilty of sin.
Okay. Now, so describe to us what you came across that's made you come to this conclusion.
I would say that 85% of the books that he had his name in were about the occult, witchcraft, and Wicca, and what was it? What's that say? Psyche. Well, Psyche or whatever. But Crowley is his hero. Aleister Crowley. And the Book of Law. And, I mean, like, he underlined stuff and that. And even I've got one of his Bibles that he has his name all over, and everything in it that he underlined is about the devil.
Really? So this is a Christian Bible, and he underlined stuff about the devil?
Yeah, pretty much everything that was in there that I saw, he had underlined, it was about the devil.
Now, can you tell...
He has a fascination with the devil, demons, and all that. You know, I mean, I don't know... I can't say for 100% that he's a devil worshiper, but it sure looks like it to me.
Just to interject here, Mr. Horn, you took pictures of one of his journals where he had written in his own handwriting, "I am the devil." Is that you who took that picture?
Well, that's me, all right.
That's you, yeah, because that kind of got published, at least on one of the West Memphis 3 researchers saw that. So that's just kind of bolstering that information about Damien Echols and the devil.
Yeah, he says it in there, and it was part of a poem he wrote. And as you know, poems usually come from the heart. And if that's what his heart feels, that's kind of weird. He also did the magic, not magic like you go to a show and watch somebody do magic on the stage, but M-A-G-I, not I-C, it's K-I-C.
And what was he doing? How was he doing magic? What made you come to that conclusion?
Well, that's actually like spells and things like that. It's not really about magic like a magic show.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at. It's more along the lines of a spell you would do, or I don't know, get people to do what you want, or it could be hexing them. I don't know.
And what made you come to that conclusion? Like you saw writings?
What I'm saying,
yeah,
that's what he was reading.
That's what he was reading. Now, a lot of the people that are fans of this guy, their claim is that, well, he was only involved slightly involved. He had a fascination with the occult and witchcraft when he was a young teenager. Now, do you have any indications of how recent this activity is that he's still involved in this?
Well, yeah, I would say all the way through the time he was in prison and after. I mean, all the books that he had in prison that he was reading and kept, he wrote his names in them, every single one of them. So I've had, I would say, boxes and boxes and boxes. I'm talking 300-400 books that he wrote his name in. And the lion's share of them were about those kind of things. Demons, Wicca, witches, potions, spells, that guy Echols, and even Anne Rice. He's got his name on a lot of Anne Rice's books. We even sold one where she wrote him a thing on it and signed her name to him.
What did she write?
She was. I don't have exactly what she said because we sold the book, but I could look it up later and send it to William, and I can tell you then. You can add it later. How about psychic vampires? Give you an idea of one psychic one.
Robert, what was the total amount of books in both storage lockers?
I've had like 500 books altogether, probably close to 3,000 books.
1,000 books, gotcha.
But now he didn't sign every single one of them books. He didn't actually probably read all them books. But people across the country sent him books when he was in prison. Some of them he wasn't allowed to even have because they weren't allowed in prison. He has probably 250 to 400 adult type comic books that are running on the side of, they wouldn't be allowed in a prison because of the content.
Is it just nude content, or is it like pornography and sexual acts?
Pornography and sexual acts.
But they're comic books.
Yeah, well, they're adult type comic books.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, how much are you selling these books for? How much are people paying you on eBay for these books?
Oh, I've been paid $250 to $2.50. It just depends on what it is. I start them out low and let the people decide what they're going to pay.
All right, that's on eBay at BK Barn, BKBARN. If you want to help out our friend here, Mr. Horn, Rob Horn, and give us all this information. Now,
And let me give you my email also. People can email me. I try and answer all questions. And it's MRLOST, the letter N, Arkansas at yahoo.com. So it would read Mr. Lost in Arkansas at yahoo.com.
Mr. Lost in Arkansas.com. At yahoo.com.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
and how many books have you sold so far?
Well over 450 probably.
Do you need a partner?
Those are books with his name in it, though.
Right.
I've sold many more books than that didn't have his name in it.
Now, what about photographs?
I've sold a couple of photographs. None of the ones that I wouldn't let my mom see, though. Those I actually sent those back to Lori and Damien. I didn't want to let the public see those because I didn't think that would be right of anybody.
So you've been in contact with Damien Echols and Lori Davis, is that correct?
Not in contact, really. I mean, I sent them an email, one line, do you want your stuff? And this is what I got. Send me postage, I'll send it to you. And they said yes, sent me one line back, and they sent them their stuff.
Gotcha.
Can you describe this?
Yeah.
Can you describe the stuff that you sent them?
I had, probably about 10 or so bad pictures that you wouldn't want anybody seeing. I sent those back because I didn't want anybody seeing them. And then 3 yearbooks, a baby book, and what else? Oh, a Bible. It was Lori's Bible that her mother sent her. Didn't look very good, very well used. And it had a letter from her mother.
Okay. Now,
would you describe the content of the photographs you sent back to them as kind of fetish type photographs involving nudity?
Definitely fetishes.
Gotcha.
That's about all I'll say. So
now, you didn't make copies of those photos before you sent them back?
Oh, no.
Okay.
But you had also published some writing from Damien Echols in his handwriting describing kind of fetish type behaviors between him and I don't know if it was Lori or some other random woman, but so these pictures were kind of similar to that type of writing. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that it was to her. It didn't say her by name, so I wouldn't go there.
Gotcha.
And no date on it, although it looks like it was probably written about the same time that he was in Supermax. And the fantasy journal, that's what I called it online. If you wanted, I can send William the pictures that I sit online with that. And he can call me and I'll talk to him about that in person. But that I took a few pictures of it, and you could read those, and it can give you an idea about what he was writing. It matched the pictures, though.
Matched the pictures, right. Didn't you say you found some of the pictures inside of the bindings of some of the books? Is that correct?
Yeah, they were hiding them to get them to him, I think, in the prison, in the bindings of books. What you do is you kind of peel away a portion of the paperwork on the cover of the book on the inside. You stick the photograph in there, and then you re-glue it, and then they get it out when they get there. All the guards will do is they just flip through the paper, through the book and see if there's anything in it, and pretty much that's it because they got so much stuff to go through.
Gotcha.
And you can tell because they literally had cut out the picture out of one and peeled it away from the Polaroid that it was, and then stuck that in a book, and you could see the picture even though they had cut it out of that Polaroid. It was that part of the Polaroid was still in this group.
Gotcha. Now, and some of the journals, the fantasy journals, describes like a ball gag and enemas and you're my adoring slave and things to that nature, correct?
Yeah, I won't argue that, but you already got it offline, it sounds like.
Yeah. Now, you said there were other pictures, though, that you still have other pictures? Or is this like pictures of friends and relatives and things? What do you have?
Yeah, I got pictures, I think, of friends and relatives and maybe a few people that were famous. There's another lady writing a book about her uncle. And it was one of the guys that they were trying to point a finger at and say
Terry Hobbs, correct?
Yeah, that's who it is. Okay. And I gave her some of the pictures that I had for free, just gave them to her. And she has a lot of the paperwork from the trial that I gave her a huge box full. Well, she paid for it. But I might as well just gave it to her, so it was cheap. And it also had information from the lawyers to Damien. So this is stuff that you couldn't get off of a site, that like that website that guy set up for the trial.
Callahan.
Right. You won't find those from lawyer to Damien on that because those are privileged. So I had a bunch of that stuff, and I'll let her have it. And it sounds like you know her, so. I mean, you can try contacting her and asking. She's a really nice lady.
Well, Ed's done an interview with Terry Hobbs, so
sure.
That can be found on his YouTube channel.
Vicky is her name.
Gotcha.
Oh, wait a second. Vicky. Maybe that's Vicky Hutchinson.
No?
Okay.
Call me and I'll give you her name.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it on
I got you. But did she seem sympathetic to Hobbs or anti-Hobbs?
Hobbs? No, that's her uncle.
Okay, so she was.
It?
Okay.
Hobbs.
No, he asked, was she against or for?
Against her for Hobbs?
Yeah.
And that was the guy that was the stepfather of one of the boys, right?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, she was for him.
Okay.
She's writing a book to try and clear up all the slander that she says these guys are putting out there about him.
Okay, great.
She's real upset about it. Pardon?
I said, great. Now you say there's famous people, too, pictures of famous people. Who do you got?
Oh, yeah. There was a lot of them. I actually had a fellow over here that was involved in the case. I can't say his name. But anyway, he told me who a lot of the people were. He recognized them. And those I gave to her also. So she has those, too.
Do you remember any of the names?
No, I don't.
The guy who came over, is his name Sean?
I can't say no names.
I know who
I
it
don't
is.
know who he was. I'm old. I forgot.
Okay. I'm all friends with him too. So, all right. So, so famous people, and you still have those pictures, or they're all gone now?
Yeah, all the photos are gone. I have some that I'm going to send to William, and that are just pictures of friends, family, and maybe some famous people. I also got photographs that were copied during the time they were making the first movie about him that was for him in his favor, where they were taken of him at Supermax. And I have one color, and then the rest are all black and white, and they are copies on copy paper. But I saw the pictures in one of the films, so I got like 20 or so of those that I'll be putting online and selling those also. Those are probably one of a kind also now.
The correspondence between Damien and his attorney, can anything interesting pop out of you in that?
Well, yeah, some of them. One of them is really cool. Just plow right into this. I have an unabridged copy of Devil's Knot, and it says, "Advance uncorrected proofs. Please do not quote this publication without checking against the finished book." And I have a letter from his lawyers, and on 9/7/2004, they traveled from San Francisco to Little Rock to review the Devil's Knot. And my assumption is there were Damien's lawyers, so they were reviewing it to see if there was any mitigating stuff against him in it, and they took stuff out. So this is probably one that has a lot of stuff in it that didn't end up in the Devil's Knot. Now, I'm not sure what year they actually published the Devil's Knot, but it wasn't in 2002. If they went up there in 2004 to review it before it was published. So the note on this book is dated 8/1/2002 to Lori and Damien. With love, Mara. And it's a paperback with a kind of a better front cover and rear cover on it. And
didn't you say, Robert, that there was correspondence between Mara Leverett and those two dating back to like 1997 or 98?
Well, I got one here from 1997. I can read that to you if you like.
Yeah.
It says, "Dear Lori, what wonderful books you sent. I am awed on this site. The choices of sites included powerful statement itself, and of course, the quietness and ordinariness of so many of the places shown is powerful, iconic too. I really like the book. I am especially pleased that you, with your interest in landscapes, saw fit to give it to me. Thanks so very much. Also, thanks for our Sunday breakfast and the ragoon. Everything considered, I think you would have saved money staying at the Super 8. But I'm so happy you didn't. All right, so yeah, but by this time, they were raking in money from people sending in donations. So she didn't stay at the cheap places anymore.
Interesting. That's incredible. That was published even before Leverett published The Boys on the Tracks. That was correspondence exist before that.
This was dated May 7th, 1997.
Whoa.
I'll read you the rest now. As it happens, it isn't there an odd little story for everything? I have a connection to one of the sites that Joe Steinfeld depicted in the School of Colorado. I attended a small Catholic girls' school, about 100 students in all. During my senior year, I was president, actually, on the society, a society devoted to our Blessed Mother. Everyone in the school belonged. The vice prefect was a junior named Kathy Power. Kathy was a fine student, a state winner of the Betty Crocker National Cooking Contest. I believe she attended Smith College on the National Merit Society. Well, in the book, a photograph of the Nepali restaurant in Eugene, Oregon, Kathy Colwell, in the book is a photograph of the Nepal restaurant in Eugene, Oregon. Kathy co-founded it and worked there under an assumed name for several years. For 23 years, she was a fugitive, wanted for her role as a getaway driver in a 1970 bank robbery in Brighton, Massachusetts, during which the police officer was shot and killed. Catherine Power finally surrendered in 1993. I have written to her in prison, and last year received a Christmas card from her and her family. Meeting you and getting to know you just a little was a treat, but you are, as Linda said afterward, the genuine article. It is not often to encounter people who mean so much to me so quickly. I have missed you too, as I know Linda has as well. I like thinking that you will be moving to this part of the country. New Orleans is a lot closer to us than New York. And even though the reason for your visits is so sad and bizarre, I can't help being glad that you are returning to Arkansas again. You are a permanent part of our family, and hope you will always stay with us when you come. I know this is a busy month for you and Lewis, a couple of people of lives to relocate, so don't feel any pressure to write, at least not until you're both well settled. Be sure to send us your address. Let us know how your house and careers are going and everything else that is important. As for me, my little garden is just planted and my book is being shopped around Hollywood. My friend Mark Gardner and I are spending our time talking about life and death, and our own life is very quiet, with certain pleasant intensity that I know you understand. Love, Mara.
Don't they just love each other?
She sent that to Lori. I mean, it's hard for me to follow.
Yeah.
That's 1997, huh? They already had a very close relationship then.
Yeah, well, Mara was a supporter of him, just like a lot of the Hollywood people. And so, she was involved with a lot of fundraisers, I'm sure, along with the other authors. Anne Rice was a big supporter of his, and I probably have 10 famous authors that actually signed books to him. There was one there that did the Hellraiser. He was the writer of Hellraiser. He signed one of the articles in a magazine to Damien.
You mentioned donations, that she was floating in donations by that point. Did you find any indication of that within the materials you purchased?
I talked to somebody in the know that there were donations that weren't going to the rest of the people involved, the other two involved, until it was corrected.
That author's name was Clive Barker, right? Clive Barker?
Clive Barker. As a matter of fact, you're right.
Now the person who told you, because I heard the story too about the donations weren't being distributed correctly. Who told you that?
Oh, I can't say any names. Okay. I promised. I'm not going to leave names out of those kind of things.
Okay.
It's not.
Was it someone intimately involved with one of the criminals?
Pardon me?
Was it someone who was dating one of the convicted criminals?
No.
No? Okay. What about, did you find any material about a group called the Process Church of the Final Judgment? Or the Process Church?
It doesn't ring a bell. My wife's shaking her head, too, because she did a lot more reading than I did. I was busy listing stuff. So, no, didn't see much. She's got a look on her face. She might have known something. Oh, magic, the moon magic? What about it?
Just that kind of magic.
Oh, moon magic, yeah.
Yeah, he's into that moon stuff, right? A lot of stuff about the moon?
Yeah, it was funny. I'll tell you, I'll relate a story to you. They would both set a glass of water in the windowsill on a full moon, and then the next morning they would drink it.
Yeah, and Echols has actually tweeted on Twitter to go on full moons and bathe in the moonlight, like lie down on a towel like you would on a sunbathe and moonbathe.
Yep, sounds about right.
Anything from Johnny Depp?
You know what? I mean, I saw a lot of the stuff he was doing, and he was big on this guy. I mean, and I guess they both had a good time because they showed up places really looking stoned. Oh, but anyway, you know, they're from Hollywood. It's kind of what you expect, so it doesn't bother me at all as long as they're in Hollywood and I'm here.
Anything about the tattoos? Anything about the meaning of his tattoos or anything like that?
Well, the tattoo on his arm was the exact same tattoo on his journal, one of the journals he wrote.
And what was written around the time of the journal? What was he thinking and what was on his mind at that time?
Well, I'll tell you what, at that time he was newly in prison and he was just ranting. I mean, he talked crazy. The only way I can put it. There was no substance to it. He just would go off talking about all kinds of weird stuff, but nothing that made any sense at all. Now, the second journal that was around 2005, 2006 time frame, that had substance in it. He was talking about his art show, and he had made the statement in one of the journals that he is only about himself and how he could make a buck after this. He made up his mind that he was done with everything, and if it wasn't anything in it for him, he wasn't messing with it.
I've seen online some drawings that he's done where he depicts himself as a vampire and stuff. Did you find any drawings in his work there?
The drawings we found they weren't like that. He had a couple that he had done of like dragons and with some writing on it, and he had wrote his name on it, so I knew it was from him. And plus, all the writings I had that he's done in the books, and you know where he wrote on the backs of pages and stuff. You know, like when you open a book and there's a blank page, he'd write stuff in there. So I know his handwriting when I saw it, and you could tell it is.
Was there ever any writings in his journal or any other writings where he just had like normal and kind of normal behavior that wasn't bizarre, that wasn't unusual? Anything just like normal?
Well, I'm sure there was some that was normal, but you know, you tend to focus on the abnormal when you're trying to do what we're doing. But there wasn't very much, I can tell you that. When he did his second journal, that was when I would call it normal stuff, because he was trying to make a buck, and you could tell he was trying to make a buck. He talked about the DNA samples and how he was pissed because they're taking so long with this and that about it, and he talked about the art show they were going to do, a book that he had wrote, you know, those kind of things.
Did he ever say, boy, I'm wrongly convicted, this is who I think did it?
He never said that he thinks this is who did it, ever.
Right. Does he ever
anything that I read in there?
Does he ever talk about, boy, I'm in here for a crime I didn't do, I'm innocent, I didn't do it?
He says it a few times, but not very many.
Okay. And in what context is that? Does it sound convincing to you?
It didn't sound convincing to me. You know what? I'm going to put that in perspective. I don't think that he said he was. He talked about the boy that was not mentally fit even to stand trial, being forced by the police to confess.
Do you recall exactly?
I don't recall him.
You know?
And anything else other than that one, I don't recall him saying, I'm innocent.
But he was saying that Jesse Miskelly was innocent, or that he was forced to confess?
He was forced to confess, is what he said. He didn't say he was innocent.
Right.
He said he was forced to confess. That's all right. They accused me of being just like the West Memphis police. Lori called me a liar. And I don't lie about anything. I have no reason to. I've never had to lie about anything.
Any like spats or arguments between him and Lori or other people he was working with?
You know, like any couple, they had their spats. I mean, I saw a few. Nothing serious, but they had their spats. I would have to talk to my wife. She did more reading. She read the journals in their entirety, plus read his book in its entirety and stuff like that. She's going to sit down and read this pre-release of Devil's Knot. I don't really get into the reading of that stuff. She does, so I'm going to let her go through that, and she can tell me.
In the list of books, anything by Maury Terry or The Ultimate Evil, do you recall?
I'm sending William a copy of every book that I've sold, every title of every book that I sold. And he's going to be able to go through those, and if he has any that he wants me to send the pictures I have of them, I'll blow them up, copy them, and I'll send them to him in an email so he can take a look at them.
And have
Just too many pictures for me to send him everything right now.
But you've taken a real inventory and documented and photographed everything?
Yeah, everything we sold on eBay, it's all documented and it's all got photographs. That's how we sold it. Okay. And we had our write-up on them. So, I can pull up the write-up of any book I've sold, as long as it's not 2 years old, they take it off by then. But in the next 6 months, it's going to be available, and if anybody, I'll help anybody I can that wants to know stuff. A guy wanted me to send him a poem out of one of the books that we sold, and I happen to still have that poem, and I sent him a copy of it. So that was just like a half hour, 45 minutes ago.
Okay, and William, can you think of any other questions?
Yeah, do you know the how long ago the storage lockers were abandoned?
Well, the one that I bought right around the 1st of July, that one was abandoned the 1st of July.
Gotcha. So do you think somebody was paying for it, or do you think people had been in and out of there recently, or
nobody had been in and out of them at all. Gotcha. The one I got, it was a mess in there. It looked like they took some stuff out, probably because it was a rather large storage unit. But all the stuff that was left was really the important stuff. All the books and all the documents, all the journals, they were all there. So anyway, the second one, the guy contacted me. He had bought it about 4 months before I bought mine.
So they only have to be in default for 3 months, and then they can be sold. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's how it reads. It's 3 months, then they have a certain amount of time they got to wait, and they got to send out certified letters.
Right.
Tell them that they're defaulting, and that if they don't pay by a certain date, then they forfeit the unit and it's sold. And they have up to the day of the auction to pay it.
Gotcha.
So I could have drove up there from where I'm at, or down there from where I'm at, and they could have said, no, they paid everybody there. They could have been every auction, every unit that was going to be sold that day. If they all paid, you just turn around and go back. Be travel for naught.
Now, the guy that sold you the second storage unit, do you think he held anything back, or he sold you everything?
He sold everything. I really believe, because if he didn't sell me everything, he's a fool. He didn't take any of the good stuff out of it, so no, I think he sold me everything.
Okay. But he didn't have any pictures and he had the pictures in his unit, or they were in your unit?
No, they were in his unit.
Oh, okay.
We were just like 2 weeks ago. We were going through the books, and I told my son, I said, "You need to flip through them books," and he did. And sure enough, he found about 5 or 6 more pictures already. We already found 5 probably, and he found another group of them.
And they were all of Lori Davis, correct?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Every one of them.
And you said, have you had any kind of backlash or any trouble since coming forward having this information?
Oh yeah, I've gotten my fair of haters that are, and they hate to be called this, but they're fans of Damien Echols.
Yeah.
You know, the West WM3. That's their group. And yeah, I got hit big time with a bunch of them. I mean, they just called me everything from the sun down, let me tell you.
By email, or did they call you?
Oh, emails. No. I didn't have too many call me. I would have been really rude.
Gotcha.
So
they're
avoid.
probably the nastiest group of people that you could ever encounter. So,
Yeah, me and William, we've dealt with them too. Yeah.
I even had a lawyer that was a friend of Damien Echols' group there that was so kind to CC me to everybody involved when he asked me a question.
Interesting.
I was kind. I answered his question, and what I got for it was a bunch of garbage.
Was he from Arkansas? Was it a lawyer from Arkansas?
No, I don't think he was from Arkansas. I might have tracked him down. I really didn't like the way he did me. That's when he CC'd Lori, and Lori was in on the conversation I had with him, and she sent back saying, he's just a liar. He's just like them West Memphis police, bunch of blah, blah, blah,
Interesting.
What was the name of the lawyer?
And it's so far from the truth. I helped out so many people when I was a cop. I could have took people to jail many a time. And instead I said, look here, you get somebody that's not been drinking, put him in that seat, and if I catch you in the seat, I said, you will go to jail. And they come back next day or the next weekend and thank me and say, I have a designated driver. And it ended it for every single one of them I ever did that to. I would, follow them up to their truck and see that they were drinking and tell them, I'm going to give you a ride back down. You pick somebody up there that hasn't been drinking, and you won't go to jail today.
Do you remember the name of the lawyer who sent you the email?
I'd have to find it. I don't remember offhandedly, but I could find it.
And what was Lori upset about? That she said she called you a liar.
I said that I contacted him. And you know what I did after that? I took her email that she wrote to me, and I took the email I wrote back to her. I copied him, and I sent him back to that lawyer and told him I did not appreciate him CCing all these people and having all these people email me with their butthurt attitudes. And that was the last I heard from him. But it just really ticked me off. I'm not making this stuff up, so it's like, and I had it in writing. But she, of course, called me a bull-faced liar.
So you didn't know too much about Damien Echols or Lori Davis prior to purchasing the materials in the storage lockers, correct?
Just in the back of my mind. It didn't hit until we got back and we saw his name, and my wife looked it up and Googled it, and then it kind of dawned on me, because I retired in 1992, just as all this stuff was starting to kick off in 93.
Right.
So I remember it in the news, but I was in Texas at the time.
Gotcha.
So I was kind of far removed from it in a way.
And after going through this experience of kind of encountering them, what's your opinion of Damien Echols and Lori Davis now? Would you like to share that?
Well, my opinion, and not that it matters any to anybody, is I don't really care for her, and he doesn't have my respect at all. He doesn't do anything for himself. He says that Lori handles everything. Maybe he is like out there because he spent so much time in prison. I have no idea. But I grew up, you take care of the people you love, and he's not. He's taking care of himself, and she's doing everything for him, and even she's not doing everything for him. So I have no clue. But it's like the guy that did The Hobbit, took him over to New Zealand. All these rich people just pampered the crap out of him. They took him to New Zealand. They took him to Hawaii. They took him to Disneyland. They took him all these places and paid his way because poor old him, he got put in prison. What they're not doing is they're not seeing the bigger picture. They didn't really know him, just like I didn't know him when I first started. After seeing everything that he preferred to read, I think the guy's a devil worshiper. No doubt in my mind about it. They were right in Arkansas when they said he was a devil worshiper. no doubt in my mind. And there's nothing going to change that just because I got that personal look into his life by everything that was in these lockers. And I would, anybody that saw it would agree with me. If they saw all the stuff he underlined in them, all the things that apparently mattered to him, it had to do with some really weird stuff.
And when you said before about the magic spells and the rituals and stuff, this was in his own handwriting, or this was stuff in the books that he underlined, or both?
It's stuff in the books that he underlined.
Okay.
No, there wasn't a journal of spells and stuff that he did or anything like that. But that's what he was into.
But you do have... Oh, sorry. Please continue.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you do have other materials of his in his own handwriting, correct? Like a decent-sized book?
Yeah, I have a book. It's not in his own handwriting. He typed it, trying to get it printed.
And what's the subject matter? Yeah.
Well, let me get it out for you and see here. Where did I do it?
Don't lose it.
No, I didn't lose it. My wife might have hid it from me, though. Let me look. Oh. Thanks for being patient.
Well, I tell you what, we can play a commercial ad if you want right now while you're looking for it. It'll take about 5 minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let's play a little commercial. We'll be back with we have William Ramsey with us, and also Rob Horn, who was one of these storage wars kind of guys. He buys storage lockers and he sells it on eBay. You can find his eBay channel at BK Barn, BKBARN, and his email is mrlostinarkansas@yahoo.com. We got Rob Horn with his fascinating contents of this storage locker belonging to the convicted murderer Damien Echols, his secret journals, and explicit photos. We'll be right back after this messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Archival Revival, the Christian Film Archive, is currently paying for vintage Christian films. They are dedicated to preserving and restoring classic Christian films and media. So if you have an original prints, negatives, or other film elements of classic Christian films, or you have audio recording masters for classic Christian record albums, they want to buy them from you. So email archival.revival@gmail.com, and they're going to make you an offer. Archival Revival wants to preserve these classic Christian films so that they continue saving people for years. These films have brought people to salvation. They want to continue that. Their staff has decades of experience in handling and preserving of film elements, and they utilize the very best climate-controlled film storage facilities around the world. Contact them today at archival.revival@gmail.com. If there's someone you know has these prints, negatives, recording masters, or other materials from vintage Christian films, you can check out their blog at archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Now, just so you understand, Archival Revival wants to pay you for these films. So you can look in your church attic, in the church basement. If you have a friend who runs a Christian youth ministry or these youth vacation Bible study camps, they have these old films in those big metal containers, 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. Archival Revival wants to buy them from you. So this is a sponsor that actually wants to give you money. And all you have to do is contact them, tell them what you have. If you're in the UK or Ireland or Africa, these films are all over the world, and they're gathering dust, and they're going to deteriorate if they don't get into the hands of Archival Revival. So that's archival.revival@gmail.com, or the blog spot is archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Don't forget, this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. Phoebe Sod is an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. The Cocoa Exchange is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries, and they make the finest silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you go to pscocoa.com, you click on the Shop Now button. You can see all their beautiful chocolates. You can order it right now tonight. It could be in your mailbox in a couple of days. Or if you want to get into the chocolate business, you want to be a chocolatier just like Phoebe Sod, you can click the Contact Us button. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with William Ramsey and Rob Horn, who obtained the contents of Damien Echols' storage locker. So, Rob, you were telling us right before we went to the break that you had a book, a manuscript written by Damien Echols. Did you find it?
Yes, I did. And it's titled A Collection of Stories and Poems by Damien. I've got it out now, and he has his prelude to it. And I'm going to get into the first one here for you. I also have a copy of one that I sold just for my own collection, just to say, I sold this. and I can talk to you guys about it, not on the air, but I can talk to you about it off the air. This one is well done. It's 91 pages, and it's typed out in a book that was probably bound in Kinko's and probably sent off to a publisher trying to get it published. I got it back, so I'm assuming that it didn't get published. So we'll see. My wife was kind and put a mark in there on one of them. And it says, here's what it says. And he was big into, if you didn't realize it, Tibetan stuff. And he took a Tibetan name, Kosan, Koson. And I think that happened around 2006. So I have a receipt from where he was getting some stuff from his store there in the prison, and he was writing out that Kosan, trying to figure out which one he was going to use. As unique as that is. So the number of people who would fit in the small room to attend her classes was extremely limited, so afterwards she would walk from cell to cell, talking to anyone who wanted to chat away. The inmates all behaved as she were the Dalai Lama himself. You know when she arrived, because word would spread like wildfire from the halls and through the barracks. Anna is here, Anna is here. The Buddhists, the Christians, the Muslims, she welcomed them all. This is just, he was talking about somebody that came in. So he writes about stuff that happened to him in the prison, and his experiences, I guess, limited experiences he had before. And it's interesting.
You're old, right?
No, it's old.
Okay.
I've got it here. This is the one and only version of it. I don't think he published it, so I mean, you guys might know more about what he's published and what he hasn't. Mostly it's just about his story about how they wrongfully convicted him. One chapter is called The Unfortunate Cat. I heard one of the most horrific stories of my life, which was reported with a great deal of pride by my mother. The Mary's tale began the way so many of my childhood tales of woe start, due to the lack of money. Yeah, this is him talking about it. And I guess their cat had a fight with a possum, and I guarantee that cat lost because possums are tough. My grandma said they tasted good if you fed them persimmons.
Right.
He has another chapter called The Painting. As a child, my family was incredibly poor. We lived in abject poverty, but seemed to spend a tremendous deal of time at the bank every Friday afternoon with my stepfather, who would come home from work and go straight to the bank to cash his check. He would then take another 20 minutes to fill out the deposit slip, hand it back to the clerk, along with the money he just received. My stepfather would not read or could not read or write a word other than his own name, so a lot of the time was spent with my mother reading and rewriting deposit slips to him week after week. Gives you an idea of some of it. In the Mail, another chapter. People are always curious to know what I've received. Very much hate mail. Hate mail is the term that they use to describe the letters from people who haven't actually stopped to learn the facts of my case and never get past the initial knee-jerk reaction. Yeah, I imagine that would be his opinion until they read the books that he read. Beauty is Religion. It has lots of chapters. The writing process is another chapter. It's really a large book with a lot of his feelings wrote in it. And poems. The back, probably the last 15 pages or so has his poetry in it. I'll read you one of his poems if you want me to.
Sure.
All right. 34. All is disconcerting, strange, yet somehow right and perfectly reasonable, to find otherworldly tranquility and more stillness than action. And then the Birdman. Each and every day in a dark and dusty shop, the bird may begins his routine. The occasional customer wanders in, drawn in by a feeling she can't put her finger on. The glorious plumes of creatures, red, gold, and green, stand in stark contrast to the proprietor himself. A foreign accent and wire-rimmed spectacles frame a face made cunning through the age. The gleam in his eye isn't necessarily humor. He compliments a patron on their judgment and selection. Once at home and behind closed doors, Birdman's fowls issued no stray squawking. Yeah, anyway.
Well, Rob,
it goes on and on.
We're running out of time, Rob. Is there any questions
Sure.
that we haven't thought to ask you that you want to tell us about?
Just the fact of all the people that are famous that supported him is unbelievable to me, but it shouldn't be. The Hollywood crowd has always been a little strange, in my opinion, and to insert themselves into things they know nothing about just boggles my mind. And when you have people like Johnny Depp and some of these rock star singers, that jump in there and say, he's innocent, without really having a friggin' clue, is just despicable. If they sat down and looked what I went through in his locker, there would be no doubt in their mind, or there would be plenty of doubts in their mind, that this guy was innocent or not. And I say not. One of the questions you asked, how many books have I sold? Neighborhood of 475 to 500 that were sold with his name on it, and his writings in them, or his underlining and highlighting in all of them. And the majority of them were really not the kind of books that you and I would read. They were definitely books about pagans and witches and demons and demonology, Crowley, any of the authors that had to do with the writings of pretty much evil, as far as I'm concerned, and what they do to people. So, yeah, his occult books, and William is going to get a copy of all the books that I've sold, so he's going to be able to go into that more. And when we get off this right now, I'd like to talk with both of you about some of the stuff I have sitting here in front of me.
Okay, great. So, Rob Horn, thank you so much. William Ramsey, thank you so much. You could find Rob's email channel at BK Barn on eBay. And once again, your Yahoo email was Lost in Arkansas?
Yeah, Mr. MRLOSTNARIZONA at yahoo.com. And that N is just the letter N.
Mr. Lost in Arkansas at
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator, but also to all different kinds of services on there. Like if you think your spouse is cheating on you, your boyfriend or your girlfriend might be stepping out on you, you give us their email address, and we trace it back to online dating websites, and we catch them cheating online. Locates, asset searches, background reports, adoption investigations, all kind of fun stuff there at emailrevealer.com. Okay. I really want to thank our guest today. We have Simon Wells, and he's the author of the book Charles Manson, Coming Down Fast. He's over there in the UK, and he's written a whole bunch of books about the Beatles, about the Stones, all kinds of fascinating topics that our audience is totally into. But it was really kind of back and forth to schedule this for me and make time for me today. So I really want to thank you, Simon, for really going out of your way and making time for me today. I really do appreciate it because I was kind of a pest. kind of pestering you a little bit there yesterday. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Simon. Can you tell us about yourself? Who is Simon Wells?
Who is he, indeed? Simon Wells was not part of the 1960s. I think that's my main drive, is that I was I sort of came to life in the 70s, and I have since nursed this upset as not being part of the 60s. So, like for many of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s, we look back on the 60s and think, oh, I wish I'd been part of that. So, the next best thing is to become a fan of the decade. And then obviously, I translated that into writing. So, I'm a full-time writer, and I'm also a musician as well, but my income derives from writing, which I thoroughly enjoy, and I'm lucky enough to be able to write about subjects which fascinate me, which is a rare treat.
Yeah, it really is, and you get to meet the most interesting people too. And travel places and stuff. It is a treat. Yeah. I'm 55 myself, so I know what you're talking about. Yeah, right. How old are you?
Same.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know. And I grew up to fascinated by that time, and then I actually went. In the late 70s, I joined up with the Yippies in New York City on Lower East Side, who were kind of like leftover, kind of the last... So
did you must have met David Peel then, yeah?
Oh, met David Peel many times. Okay, David Peel, sure.
Cool.
Oh, that's right, he just passed. That's right, he just passed.
Yeah, that's right, just recently, yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping to get an interview with him before,
Bummer.
Yeah, I know, but he never got back to me, though. But in my childhood show, we used to run into David Peel all the time. So... this book here, Charles Manson, Coming Down Fast. Now, it's kind of sort of like the negative side of the 60s. How'd you land in that area?
It's anyone who's a student of the 60s comes across Charles Manson. I mean, he is popularly, if I can say that right, he's sort of been cast as the bogeyman, the man who drew the curtain over the 60s. And I'm a big Beatles fan, so, again, you bump into Manson on the Beatle track. He's tied up with that as well. What interests me a lot, as someone who sort of is fascinated by the truth and is very skeptical of myth-making, of course, which in the 60s is largely a myth, this was the world's most famous serial killer and mass murderer who really never murdered anyone. And that, to me, stuck out. And the fact that people bought that, you only have to go on to, I don't know, was it CN or whatever the crime channel is, to find Manson lumped in with all the other serial killers. And so that was an interesting point for me. And equally, as someone who, probably like yourself, I actually grew up in a left field community and sort of hung out with a lot of travelers and hippies and whatnot. I've met quite a lot of Charles Manson characters in my time. Not necessarily involved with murder, but certainly hugely involved with spouting BS, influencing young people, mediocre buskers, handing out drugs, living in communes, teepees, benders, buses, the whole kit and caboodle. So, to me, the Manson story, sans murder, wasn't that unusual. It was just, and Manson, again, was not someone that I'd come across a lot of people like him in the alternative community. So, I had an opportunity, a few years ago now, but I had an opportunity to really get to grips with it. And so I decided, rather than the raft of books, which just all concentrate on Manson the maniac, Manson the murderer, Manson the lunatic, I thought I'd actually take the complete opposite and actually try and demystify, deconstruct the mythology, and just present Manson as what I saw him as a, sort of mediocre busker, had influence over young people. I mean, we've all, been in pubs and bars at a certain age, and there's always this guy who's either come out of prison or he's got he's a drug dealer, and he sort of speaks your language when you're a teenager. So to me, that was Manson, and I don't see the story that fantastic at all. Obviously, the murders, which he's obviously associated with, or largely associated with, that's a different thing. But that to me also was unusual, because as we know in LA, and like other sort of crime hotbeds around the world, people die every single day from gang murders, and I had to check the murder figures from LA from the 60s. It's nothing sort of shocking. So why did this one story stick out? So then we get into celebrity, and Sharon Tate. I mean, people might think I'm being insensitive, but again, my whole brief was to literally just hone this down, strip away all this guffaw and this hysteria. Sharon Tate if she had not been involved in these murders, would we be talking about this now? I think not. So it really is a tale of celebrity and hysteria. And I wanted just to strip that back.
That's fascinating because when you were talking, I remembered. Because I remember as a little kid, when the story first hit the newspapers, back then we had newspapers, right? And first hit on the news. I remember, because in our neighborhood, we had those long-haired kids, and they were smoking pot. We knew they were up to something. We knew the Beatles. We knew something was going on because I was a young kid. And I remember when these murders came out, my mother was saying, well, what are those kids up to? And she said, they take these drugs and they get a picture in their mind of someone they have to kill, and then they have to go kill that person. And rational people, believe that kind of thing, maybe that was
Manson really was the guy who killed the hippie dream, because I spoke to many people in the counterculture after the Manson murders broke. And they said if you had long hair and a beard, and you were viewed with huge suspicion.
Yeah.
So he really finished it off, the whole hippie dream. But again, he didn't finish it off. It was the media which elevated him to this near messiah status. Which, of course, when you send that message out on the wires, people everywhere, in their little towns and, villages and hamlets or in cities, that, right, he's a hippie. I never thought Manson really was a hippie. He never actually called himself a hippie. He called himself a slippy. And his brief was to slip under the consciousness of the hippies because they were so sort of complacent and, so again, there's so many contradictions at play here. But the popular personification of Manson, the maniac, the murderer, the messiah, the crazed messiah, has endured. And as I said to you, before we spoke, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. Manson's great copy. I mean, he's the lunatic, and of course now he's accepted that role. So when you see the interviews in prison with the swastika and the shaved head and the crazy stuff, all going on. He's accepted that part. He was never really like that. He's become what the prosecution wanted him to be.
Well, then tell us, what did you find that he was really like? Because we know he was kind of involved in the music industry and stuff like that, with the Beach Boys and stuff, and Terry Melcher. What did you find about the real Manson?
Okay. Manson was... Manson is a creation of the 60s. I don't think there's any other decade in the 20th century that would have allowed him a voice. And to me, his timing was impeccable, to be released in March 1967 in LA and then to make his way up to Haight-Ashbury. This for him was just an incredible moment. And of course, as we know in Haight-Ashbury, in that summer of love, people were given a voice. And someone like Manson, who would have been just otherwise sort of pretty much ignored as a hobo or tramp, was they used to call him, what was it, the gardener in Haight-Ashbury, so the guy who planted seeds in young people's heads, and, all these hundreds of thousands of people gravitating to San Francisco looking for an answer. And of course, you've got this guy who's just come out of prison. He's got that collateral of being slightly edgy. He sings. He plays guitar. His songs were unusual. They definitely were unusual for the time. Many of the lyrics that he put in his songs were sort of filched from his delving into Scientology, which again, is pretty primitive stuff at that point. So there was. These are. If your listeners want to go onto YouTube, you'll find all these sessions that he did way back in '67 and '68, and they're unusual songs. So, I'm of the belief that actually, more than anything, he wanted to be a successful musician, and he, as is evident from his fraternization with people in the music industry, it was after some sort of record contract. People have said to me, no, he wasn't. And I said, well, you're chasing the likes of Neil Young and Dennis Wilson and Terry Melcher and others. There's something going on here, So I think really his main thing at that point was to assume some sort of status as a songwriter, singer-songwriter, of which there was quite a few at the time. So I think that, and as we know with anyone who plays a guitar, especially amongst teenagers, it gave him another side to his personality. So it was quite a package, as they say, back then. And this is the other thing, which he really wasn't a maniac, because if he was a maniac, nobody would have hung around him. It's the other point, I'm sort of pains to point out that he was actually a very likable, engaging, charismatic individual that young people were drawn to him, like a bit of a Pied Piper. So, it can't have been all bad. If it had been all bad, there would be only maybe one or two people around him. So, he was a very likable guy. I encourage your listeners to try and find his first recording session at Universal in September 1967, which is online. And you have, in between these songs, a very happy, smiling, evidently character who's, just a likable individual. So I found that interesting. It certainly went against the grain of everything else I've been told. But evidently, if he was a creepy, nasty, vicious sort of character, there would be no followers. So that was the attraction. Another, without being too far off tangent, he had obviously his commune, which established itself on the fringes of Los Angeles the following year. And there was a very eminent journal in San Francisco called the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs, which commissioned a study on community living and group commune living. And of all the hundreds of communes that are sprung up around the hinterlands of San Francisco and right through northern and southern California, they chose Manson's commune to do a feature on. So, this is against the grain of what went on later. And that's much like the hippie dream, much like, as anyone who's lived in communes or in alternative communities, there are such things as severe downers. And that came later. But certainly at the beginning, no, he was a likable individual. Was a jovial character. So I found that fascinating, be honest with you. And I wanted to give that as much space as possible because, again, all the previous accounts of Manson, where he was a nutcase, a lunatic. But as I said, no one would hang around him. So,
well, a couple of questions.
Things definitely did change.
You mentioned that someone did a study or a book. Who was it that did the study of his commune?
Your listeners may know of the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, which was a sort of very eminent alternative medical clinic, which was run by some by doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists, and they had a house journal called the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs.
Okay.
And they commissioned this study into commune life and chose Manson's commune. So, as I say, Manson was probably well known, and the group commune structure, I think the actual article was called. So they were taken seriously. They actually were taken seriously early on. Again, I didn't know this, and I think it was important to highlight that.
Yeah, I never heard of that. And it's interesting, too, because the picture we have of Manson was framed by Vincent Bugliosi,
Correct.
And then we look at his later life, and we see how he has this theory of, Lee Harvey Oswald being the lone gunman. The guy actually obviously has an agenda, you know what I mean, and what he wants to present to us. I don't think that could be...
Yeah, very fair point. And Bugliosi had a... I mean, if one wants to, again, take it out of context... Bugliosi had a very difficult job trying to convict Manson of, 9 counts of first-degree murder when he wasn't involved with any of them, or certainly involved in the murders, I should say. So he had to construct a theory around Manson. And it was very shaky, tenuous, I think, that he managed to successfully bring that about. Certainly Manson was an accessory and a likely possible conspiratorial role, but that's really it. And I think those charges, if they've been brought reasonably, may well have put Manson in for maybe 5 or 6 years in jail on accessory conspiracy charges, not 9 counts of first-degree murder and a death sentence. But as I say, the prosecutor, Manson wasn't present at these murders, so to this day, I still think that's questionable.
Yeah, if it wasn't for this mind control theory, and this cult figure type controlling other people, which was unusual litigation even for the time, you're right. What could they have really got on this guy? And if this was just a regular drug gang, like the Crips or the Bloods, how much could they have gotten away with in the same situation, prosecution-wise?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a situation which basically there was a sort of a moral panic around these murders, and I think that while obviously the people who committed the murders, there was no question about it. As one lawyer once said to me, this wasn't a whodunit, it was a whydunit. And I think that's really interesting because, as I say, I think it was my research is, I went as deep as I could on this. This really wasn't a masterminded hit or a drug hit or anything. It was a knee-jerk reaction to rejection. And it was also tied in with, it was the grubby end of, again, without going too deep into it, but as someone who's experienced commune life and alternative left field communities, when things go down, they go down quite fast, hence my title of my book, Coming Down Fast. And, like anything associated with the drug culture, you get incredible highs and you get frightening lows. And really, these murders came out of a frightening low and a period where Manson's commune was splintering, fracturing, and deconstructing. This wasn't any great, what the prosecutor wanted to call it, helter-skelter murders to start a race war, and where Manson can take control of the world. I mean, that is complete and utter nonsense. It was a grubby, disappointing set of circumstances which allowed this knee-jerk reaction to enact this horror without any real mastermind. You know, I mean, people have said to me, "Oh, it was a drug hit," and the mob had engaged Manson's tribe to sort of rip off the drug dealers and that were surrounding certain Hollywood personalities. You know, in my experience of criminals, there's no way the mob will trust Manson and his family with anything. The one drug burn that a character named Tex Watson did prior to the murders was so sloppy and hideous that there's no way that they would be entrusted with that. I think it's an affront to actually even believe that. So that was my take on it, you know, to strip it right back down, and then to see that what you have is this, you know, just a guy who's probably, you know, the whole notion of the so-called Manson family, you know, that if you really want to talk about cult leaders, you know, talk about Jim Jones, you know. The Manson cult at the time of the murders had probably whittled itself down to maybe a hardcore of 8 or 10, with the flotsam and jetsam of associated characters that always hung around them, who were just usually there for drugs or sex. So I don't call that a cult. I call that just a band of no-hopers, really.
You know, it's interesting. I just had a friend recently here in Vegas. She's a local artist. Wonder Hussey. Her name is Sarah Jane Woodall. And it says YouTube channel, too, as well. It's a local artist model. And she took a trek out there to Barker Ranch, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And hiked out there as far as she could get, and took the truck out there as far as she could get. Now, how many people, it was like 10 that made it out to Barker Ranch? Because that's a pretty remote area to convince a group of people. And they got a bus out there, too, somehow.
Yeah, they did indeed. The Gola Wash. I mean, it's the hardest place in the world to go to. At that point, Manson's commune was and Manson himself were really starting to splinter. There was also criminality started coming into this so-called family, bikers and drug dealers. I think Manson was feeling the heat, so the whole notion of going out to the desert was a sort of an attempt really to sort of escape the lawmakers who were bearing down on them. So it was probably maybe 10 to 20 people out there, and people sort of arriving, because obviously, you know, the word was out that there was this thing going on. But, you know, the conditions out there are not conducive to living, full stop. I mean, it's an impossible place to live, and to sustain yourself, I mean, it would be impossible. So it was more of a dream. I mean, you know, the whole thing of this also is the whole LSD landscape, you know, was people were trying to process it into a reality. Manson was no different in that, you know, and so, you know, the big skies and hallucinogenic landscapes that LSD creates in your head, you know, people think, well, we can live that out. Well, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. So, you know, it was just his little idea to move things away. This move was also in tandem with his rejection by the music community. So, you know, that was a big element in what was going on. Huge element, you know, because Manson had basically he had some initial interest by various celebrated people, but again, you know, I mean, he brought with him a caravan of young girls at recording sessions, but you know, people quite liked that. That was not an issue. The real problem was that Manson's music, when you saw him with the girls singing along and all the rest of it, was fascinating. When you bounced it down onto tape, it didn't do much. It wasn't really commercial, and that was the main reason that they decided not to go ahead with it. Yes, they were a little bit spooked by his behavior, but ultimately, commercially, it really wasn't going to do too much. So I think they tried, and I know Terry Melcher had said that they tried every avenue to sort of try and present Manson's music above and beyond the busking presence which he had, and it just didn't work. And at the end of the day, someone had to tell him that, which led to this whole sense of rejection which Manson had since a child. That weighed heavily, and again, that was really one of the kickstarts for the sort of horror that unfolded.
Now, his connection to the music industry, did you find any connections to the Beatles? Because there is that story about how the Beatles lyrics were painted on the doorway there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All good children go to heaven. What did you find out about his connections with the Beatles?
Yeah, I mean, I was led to believe for a few people that Manson was enchanted by the Beatles, mainly because they came from humble beginnings, and I think he sort of saw a parallel there, that he could actually sort of get from humble beginnings. And, by 1967, the Beatles had dropped their mop-top personas, and they were sort of into sort of being quite creative with their lyrics. And I think Manson identified with a lot of that. Their original bus, which they used to go around North and South California, was a magical mystery tour. So, they were very much, I think, following in that same line as the Beatles. But it was the Beatles' White Album. It was actually in the UK. It was just called The Beatles, believe it or not. That Manson drew a direct line with. Now, we're entering into quite sort of a strange territory here, but this was not unusual in the 60s for people to be reading stuff into records. There was a big thing that Paul McCartney was dead, and if you played an album backwards, you heard this, you heard the Beatles saying he's dead, and all sorts of clues. Everybody was dissecting everything at that point, so it wasn't unusual. That Manson went a step further, and as I said, the interesting thing is that as the result of excessive LSD use and with a possibility that there was a pre-existing mental health condition, I think possibly maybe low-level schizophrenia, Manson actually felt that the Beatles were talking to him. So we are told. I mean, again, the prosecutor made a big thing of this. Having sat around campfires myself with people smoking dope and talking all sorts of nonsense, I've equally heard people saying that people are talking to them through records. So it's not that unusual. And certainly in the counterculture, you hear all sorts of stories that rock groups are supposedly communicating things to people. A lot of it, which is nonsense. But again, the Manson family and Manson was no different to those sorts of people. So, but again, the prosecutor made a big thing that the Beatles' White Album, Manson had read into several tracks that there was an impending race war that was going to make itself known, that the Beatles were aware of it. And there's a couple of tracks which Manson apparently saw, some quite, to him it was convincing forewarning that the apocalypse was going to happen. One was Helter Skelter, which, if you really want to know the origins of Helter Skelter, Paul McCartney wrote it about a fairground ride, and it was a fairground ride with a crude sexual analogy of coming down from the top and going down to the bottom. But Manson saw it as far deeper than that. He apparently drew a connection with the biblical passage called Revelation, in effect, Revelation 9, where this hole to the bottomless pit where the apocalypse would start. I mean, it's quite fantastic in its literal sense of the word. But there's a couple of things which resonated with Manson's ambient schizophrenia, which they had a girl. He used to rename all the girls, and one of the girls was called Sadie, and Sexy Sadie. Well, he'd been calling this girl this for 6 months or so, and then of course the Beatles come along with a song called Sexy Sadie. So that confirmed part of that. And Manson also was interested in the Bible and had quoted often this biblical passage called Revelation 9. And of course, what do the Beatles do? They record a track on the White Album called Revolution 9. And I don't know if you've heard it. I'm sure,
Sure.
Your listeners can check it out. It's a sort of collage, a melange of sounds, and it's like a patchwork of all various sorts of sounds. And to Manson, it was sort of, it's a soundtrack to the apocalypse. He said he could hear the word rise being shouted out in it, and if you actually listen to it, it does sound like someone's shouting out rise. In fact, going deeper into it, it's John Lennon shouting out all right which is he clipped from the recording of Revolution, the song You Say You Want a Revolution. At the end, it just dissolves into all right, all right, all right. And he clipped that and stuck it on Revolution 9, but it sounds like Rise. This also chimes with a song of Paul McCartney's called Blackbird. Blackbird singing in the dead of night, you've been waiting for your moment to arise. Well, again, that played into it. So he drew this sort of connection with it. And I think ultimately that, to many of his followers who were all whacked out a lot of the time, it made some sort of sense. But as I'm always at pains to point out, no connection had been drawn between murder at that point. I think this is campfire, stoned campfire dribble. This is the sort of stuff that people just spout out if you hang out with the alternative community.
But let me ask you specifically, those lyrics, were they painted on that door before the album came out or after?
Right. Well, what you were quoted earlier, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 all tunes. Yeah, no, that actually came out on Abbey Road, and Abbey Road wasn't released till August, September 1969. So that was after the murders. They found that door at the Sparns Ranch, which was the Manson Ranch, way after the murders. But the one Beatles lyric which was far more telling was Helter Skelter, which was actually written in blood on one of the victims' refrigerators.
Right.
Albeit they spelt it wrong. It was Healter, H-E-A-L, Helter Skelter. But this is interesting. We're skipping ahead a bit here, but this is really quite interesting because the police, when they did their report on that night of murder at the La Biancas in Los Angeles, they didn't report the fact to the media that Helter Skelter, or Rise for that matter, had been written on the wall. And given Manson had been spouting his Helter Skelter theories around the music community and everywhere, I've always been of the belief that had actually been issued that night. Manson and his cohorts would have been behind bars within a few hours. I also think that the girl, Patricia Grenwinkle, who wrote that on the refrigerator and then reported that back to Manson, was the sole reason why the murder stopped and that they cleared off, because Manson, being a jailbird and a pretty seasoned one at that, would realize that Helter Skelter would immediately send everyone his way. So, again, it's not a very clever band of criminals, It's remarkable that it took so long to bring them all to book. I think it was just sloppiness, and the police intoxicated a completely different angle to what eventually people were caught for.
Let me ask you a question. Now, you mentioned earlier about his dabbling with Scientology, right? Now, what do we know about that? Was he just getting the initial auditing, or did he actually pay for classes with Scientology?
No, actually what happened is he was on a long stretch in Channel Island, and he had he realized at one point, this is a sort of defining epiphany for him, that he'd been, the other thing I was pointing about Manson, he wasn't a very good criminal. He kept getting caught, So he's on this 10-year stretch for passing a bad check, and he realized that actually at some point, that you're facing that long stretch, you've got to try and do something with your time. And there happened to be a Scientologist who was serving time there as well, who was holding unofficial lectures, auditing sessions in Scientology in the prison. So, according to this guy, Manson had 150 hours of auditing, which is an intense amount of Scientology input. And as I say, I think that, again, Scientology is another issue completely, but it does look into the psyche. It does sort of look at survival and ego dynamics. And I think that found great favor with Manson. So he did apparently, allegedly, when he was released, he did actually go to a celebrity center, or one of the centers in Los Angeles, and kept an interest in that. Whether he'd read Dianetics, I imagine he must have. And, Los Angeles has had a sort of strong continuum with Scientology. So, at that point, and also another story that Manson was also came across a splinter group of Scientology called the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which had an office or a chapter in San Francisco, and they also spouted more apocalyptic, more fantastic angles to Scientology, which he got involved with. So there's that as well, which all plays into the whole part of it. So, Manson ultimately was a bit of a magpie. He was pinching from Scientology, the Process, from the Beatles. I think he really cherry-picked all these very popular bits of religions and thought processes and sort of twisted them in his own direction.
Now, are you familiar with the work of Maury Terry, the book The Ultimate Evil?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, because when you look at the Process Church with their connections to the Son of Sam cult in New York City, was kind of to create chaos, kind of like a helter-skelter and a race war kind of thing with that, okay? It sort of fits in with the Process Church being connected to Manson in L.A. Are you familiar with the INS document, the INS report that Terry had that said that the Manson family girls were sewing Process emblems into their blankets while they were in prison there?
I had to really check this one out because it's never really been challenged. I believe what Maury Terry wrote was utter nonsense. And I was lucky enough to track down one of the original Process guys, who actually is an English guy who was over there. And it confirmed to me that I believe the Process Church actually took action against...
No, that was Sanders. Yeah, it's Sanders, yeah.
Yeah. As I say, I don't see... Other than people like Manson sort of passing their way, I don't think the Process Church were involved in ritualized slaughter and anything at all. And in fact, they were the head of the Process Church, Robert de Grinston, and his wife Mary Ann, were quite passive individuals. They had a love of animals, and in fact, I think to this day there's still an animal sanctuary bearing their name or the Process name. It was Terry's stuff sort of joined dots together, which I don't think were particularly. They couldn't really be challenged. It was interesting, as I say. I really nailed down this guy who was out there, and they were a very innocent group of people because they used to have a magazine, the Process Church, and they thought it would be awfully fun to have an issue called Murder. I think it was not Death, that was Death, where they actually managed to get someone inside where Manson was waiting charges. They managed to get him to write a feature on death. And, of course, then people just connected the two. But when I spoke to the guy, and again, Timothy Wiley, his name was, he's still around, he just said that it was just the innocence of the time that you would try and, you get someone who's been convicted of murder to write about death. It was no more than that. But then, of course, what it does, it sends out these vibrations and signals to other more opportunist individuals who want to link the two together. So Timothy told me that as far as he was concerned, Manson certainly was in the vicinity of the Process Church chapter in San Francisco. I don't remember him at any meetings. He may well have popped in and grabbed some literature, and that really is about it. I've got no other... and actually someone's just made a very good film about the Process, which I helped contribute to, and no one there of all the existing Process ever remembers Manson. The only reason they're connected to him is because of this article he wrote for their magazine.
Okay, but we know that the Son of Sam cult was involved in murders in New York City. That wasn't innocent. They were involved in animal sacrifices.
But was that linked to the Process Church?
Well, you have Manson, Berkowitz, his connection to Roy Radin. Roy Radin was murdered by Bill Menser, and the connection to, I believe there's many connections to Process.
Okay, as far as I was aware, I think most of them that Terry did were just made up or certainly embellished. Or, as I say, my brief was with Manson, so it was not something I could really go down that road. But as I will say categorically, as far as Manson's concerned, the only connection he had with them was ambient at best.
And you've never seen that INS report that connects Manson to the Process Church, and also connects to that Sirhan Sirhan, the assassin.
I think I must have read it in the Terry book, but because there were so many inaccuracies and falsehoods and fantasies, as far as I could see, I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I mean, it's easy. It's very, very easy to, if we're dealing with criminals, you can write anything you want about them. I really had to bear down on hard facts rather than suppositions. And as I say, I dismissed Terry's book because I just felt it was just it didn't ring true for me. In as much as Ed Sanders' book didn't, I have grave suspicions on if it's not referenced or the characters are unreliable. And my God, some of the characters associated with the Mansons are less than reliable.
Did you run across any information about Sirhan Sirhan attending parties at I forget the woman's name, Polanski's wife.
At the Sharon Tate?
Yeah, attending parties at Sharon Tate's home there, and sex parties and drug parties that also included the Process Church. Are you familiar with that document?
Well, again, there was absolutely no... and people get confused as well, because obviously the Process Church actually originated in London.
Right.
That was where it started. And there were Process members in London who were sort of fraternized, who were around... They were around everybody, but there was a sort of certain set around Polanski. But it was no more than that, from what I could see. And definitely the Seattle Drive house where the murders were, I had absolutely no information to lead that any of the Process Church were involved with that. The so-called sex parties, which Polanski and Tate and Peter Sellers and Yul Brynner and all these characters were supposedly involved with. Again, I feel that's been embellished as well. There was obviously parties, there was obviously drugs, and there was obviously sex, but to the sadomasochist parties of people being whipped and all sorts of stuff, I think it's just people's lively imaginations, to be honest with you.
And what about filming porn there? What did you come up with that?
With what, sorry?
That they were filming pornography.
Well, I spoke to one of the detectives there that, because there was long considered to be pornographic films. This was Ed Sanders' territory, I think, had actually pointed this out originally. The only film they actually found was a home video of Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate making love, and it was apparently very basic, or probably for their own use. The one thing I will say, though, in the 40, 50 years since this story emerged, I would have expected some photographs or some film to have surfaced, in that period. I would have expected more than just suspicion to have surfaced. I'm not really convinced that there was anything really of the level that they were suggesting. Where they got their lines crossed, Sharon Tate was involved in a film called The Eye of the Devil in 1964, where she was involved in an occult. It was a sort of very much a B movie where she played an occult woman in a cult somewhere in France, I think it was. When the murders broke, the press got hold of these photos of her dressed up with sort of, regalia and said she was involved with them. Well, it was all pinched from that movie, Again, it's again the whole thing of myth-making. So I don't believe, how can one comment on something when it's only been suggested? There's no proof, there's no evidence. The police did a thorough search and they found that one videotape. And from what I know is that the videotape was viewed and then it was placed back in the place they found it, in the loft of the Seattle Drive house. So I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Again, I would if I saw it or saw a real cogent reference to it.
Okay, then what was the motive for the murder and why did they pick those victims?
That's a very good question, and it's one which, over the years has has taxed minds or has people have drawn conclusions. The reason for the murders, a ambient member of the Manson family, a character called Bobby Beausoleil, had been involved in a drug deal that had gone wrong. And through a series of circumstances, that the character who was Beausoleil was acting as a sort of fence between this guy and a group of bikers, and the dealer manufacturer would not refund the money, and just things got wrong, and Beausoleil and a couple of other people attached to Manson who used to hang out at this guy's house. The guy was murdered. Manson knew about it, and he decided to clear off after that. And when he got back to Sparns Ranch, it was the news that the character Bobby Beausoleil had been arrested, and they found the blood. So Manson was apoplectic, was aware that obviously because he was loosely associated to this so-called Manson cult, it would probably fall back on him. Manson had been aware at a place called Esalen, which is a New Age institute at Big Sur,
Sure.
and he'd been trying to preview his music there with little interest. So he was on a major downer. In his absence, the girls at the ranch had cooked up an idea that if they committed a copycat murder to the murder of this character, whose name is Gary Hinman, that it would, with Beausoleil in custody, it would defer attention from it. And from what I painstakingly researched to Manson's movements, he arrived back at the ranch in Big Sur at around 2-3 o'clock at the afternoon of August 8. He just green-lighted it. I believe he said, "Fine, we'll just find somewhere and we will kill them brutally, and we'll draw signs on the doors and the walls." What they'd done with the murder of Gary Hinman to defer initial attention was to write on the wall of Hinman's house a political piggy in blood, so hoping that the Black Panthers would be implicated with it. So with Beausoleil incarcerated, they thought if they do another murder similar and paint these sort of witchy signs or strange signs, that it obviously couldn't be Beausoleil and be freed. I mean, it's completely innocent nonsense, but that is the level of their intelligence. That's what we were working with, not the Messiah who's calculating this murder spree. And so why the victims? The only if it was Terry Melcher who'd rejected me on the music, well, Melcher had moved, and Manson knew he'd moved. I strongly believe that the reason that the murders were committed in Cielo Drive was, one, it was an isolated community, and two, the house was at the end of the drive. Manson is a sort of, as I say, a seasoned jailbird. You wouldn't commit a murder in a busy residential street. You would find somewhere which would allow you an easy exit. Manson knew of the house. Several of the girls had gone swimming there when Terry Melcher was there, and Tex Watson, the chief hatchet man that night, knew. So they knew the layout. It was at the end of the drive, so it would allow a swift exit. And in, again, a knee-jerk way, the house symbolized the community which had rejected Manson's music. Yeah. So it was symbolic. I don't think they actually cared or knew exactly who was there. There was no one there really who had really actually sort of rejected Manson in any way, or any of the people. They were not pivotal in any way to his music career. So my own feeling is that they chose that house purely because it was isolated at the end of the drive and would allow, not too much attention. So that's my feeling on that.
So basically at random.
Random-ish. I mean, it was random to me suggests anywhere. To me, it was the people were random, definitely. The victims were random, at random. There was nothing there that would have linked Manson with Sharon Tate, really. You may have come across her, but she hadn't sort of rejected him or anything, or any of the other characters. so ultimately, I think it was more a case of the location. And also, as I said, that it did symbolize. I think one of Manson's quotes when someone said, when they got back, he said, "Oh, well, they're just a bunch of movie stars," or something like that. So I don't think he really cared. I mean, obviously, a lot of movie stars in Beverly Hills. But as I say, I think they knew the location. They knew it. I don't think there was anything there that would suggest that, other than just it being a symbol of the world that had rejected Manson. And also, Manson had also gone along with this sort of copycat idea. He probably thought it was probably a good idea. Again, if he'd been planning this, he kept it pretty quiet. He didn't know about Bobby Beausoleil's arrest until that afternoon. So, that's quite a short time to sort of mastermind something like this. But it's if it was a mob hit, if it was a mob there was drugs and whatnot up there, I think they wouldn't have been as sloppy as this. This was pretty, painting signs all over the place and blood everywhere, and they wrote "pig" on the door of the house in Sharon Tate's blood. I should say Susan Atkins did.
Let me ask you a question. Back to Bobby Beausoleil for a second, because he wound up working on a film with Kenneth Anger. Do you know how that came about? Yeah, well,
Beausoleil's a hugely talented musician, composer, who prior to any association with Manson was a bit of a mover and shaker in both LA and San Francisco, and he sort of hooked up with Kenneth Anger prior to any Manson connection, and was living in his. Anger had this old house which was once a Russian consulate in San Francisco. I think Anger was fascinated with Beausoleil, and Beausoleil was a promiscuous talent for his young years. So yes, he worked on Invocation of My Demon Brother, I think it was, or Lucifer Rising. No, it was Lucifer Rising, yeah. That film, yeah. Of which I think he finished off the soundtrack in jail eventually. Right. I mean, it's so crazy, but yeah, he was. I mean, I spoke to Bobby a few times in the preparation for the book, and I think he was sorry he got mixed up with Manson. I think the only reason he really came into Manson's orbit was because of the music. The pair of them were. Well, I think Beausoleil was reasonably established, and Manson was budding, was a budding, go-getting musician. So, and they did I found out they did a recording session together in I think it was Gold Star, somewhere quite eminent. So there was a link there, but I don't think Beausoleil was part of the Manson family. He just got hooked up with bad company, basically.
But you would describe Kenneth Anger as a Satanist, right?
Would I describe Kenneth Anger as a Satanist?
Yeah.
Left field, interested in Satan. I wouldn't say an actual card-carrying Satanist.
Okay.
But I'd say that he was definitely of the left field. I think he definitely was interested in that. Like a lot of those artists, there's a real... fascination, especially in the 60s, where anything goes, But I've no idea if he's a practicing Satanist.
Okay, and the film, I think he described himself as a practicing Satanist, but now also too, the film...
He may well have done, I haven't come across it.
The film Lucifer Rising actually there's a death of one of the actors in the film, and they kept it in the film.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I didn't know about the death of an actor. I mean, that's a crime scene.
It was. I think it was a motorcycle accident. Like a stunt. Right. Fascinating, and they kept it in the film. Now,
well, it's been years. Yeah, I watched it once for research purposes because I think Beausoleil's in it, isn't he, to start with, and also another character, Donald Cammell, who went on to make the film Performance, is in this as well. Mick Jagger did some music for us as well, if I right remember. But it's a pretty crude home movie, if I right remember.
Hard to watch.
But no, all these elements were pulled in for the whole Manson thing, So Kenneth Anger, possible Satanist. Well, then that means Manson's a Satanist. It's the spirit of the time that anything goes, and we'll just drag it in. I mean, I believe Anger was terrified when the Manson thing broke, and he tried to destroy one of the films with Beausoleil, and then he took him onto the desert and tried to destroy the negatives and stuff. I mean, it spooked a lot of people out, this story.
Did you actually talk to Anger?
No, I didn't. I think I sent him an email and I got some strange thing back. I think he's not really talking about. He's never really talked about Manson at all. I think he's absolutely the whole Manson episode is something which even he probably couldn't envisage in his head. You know.
Now, after the murders, one of the stories out there is that Polanski suspected John Phillips, Papa Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas. He suspected that he was involved, and he actually went and broke into his house looking for a copy of his handwriting to compare with the writing on the wall. What did you find in your investigation of that?
Well, he actually went further. He was putting down. He was trying to get samples of DNA and blood and everything in the car. I mean, the thing was that there's other weird stuff here as well. Which, being Hollywood and being the 60s, there was a lot of people involved with wife swapping and stuff. Not any any great thing, but I mean, and paranoias were enormous. I mean, Polanski was possibly one of the worst. He was shagging anything that moved everywhere, So I think in his heightened state, for some reason, he imagined John Phillips, who was part of that crowd with the connection with, is it Mama Cass Elliot? Yeah. Whose Mama Cass Elliot's sort of personal drug-dealing boyfriend had had visited Cielo Drive. And so they were all part of the same community. But he had a fascination with John Phillips for some strange reason. And he definitely went to the house, and he definitely was searching for bits of information, as I say, to the point of breaking into the house and into his car, looking for some sort of clues. But that's probably a height of his desperation at that point.
And then what do you make of Robert Evans and Jack Nicholson showing up, supposedly going to the house and cleaning up? What do you make of that?
I didn't find any evidence to support that at all.
Oh, really?
The Polanski house, Cielo Drive?
Yeah. I know. Robert Evans talks about it. Robert Evans himself says he said he was supposed to be babysitting Sharon Tate that night and keeping an eye on her for Polanski. And he talks about it in one of his films, in one of his interviews.
Yeah. You'd be interested to know that I found about 20 or 30 people supposed to be at the house that night.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I mean, so many of them, and people have dined out on this story. I mean, the reality was that there was no party that night apart from the 4 people who were murdered. It's. I mean, maybe people in their heads thought that they were going to go around there, but no, and they had plenty of opportunity to go around there as well, because, as I say, the party of Jay Sebring and Wojciech Rakowski, Abigail Folger, and Sharon Tate, they went into town earlier that night for dinner, and so no, again, it's all part of the myth. I don't believe it personally.
Okay.
Why would you anyway? And also, why would you want to claim that you were invited and never went? Or I mean, that's just.
Oh, like you said, a lot of people say that, but Robert Evans himself says that he went there with Jack Nicholson to clean up the blood before Polanski came home. And it's interesting because Evans later on was involved in those Cotton Club murders, the murder of Roy Radin, who was involved in the Son of Sam cult in New York. And the hitman in that case, who's convicted in prison, was Bill Menser, who was also the bodyguard for Papa Phillips and for Mama Cass Phillips.
Well, it doesn't ring true because the timeline of the events of the murder and the discovery, the house was immediately a crime scene, and it was actually roped off by police until Polanski came back. So how they got through that and cleaned up. The story I know, which is true, which is bizarre, is that actually it was Sharon Tate's father and Roman Polanski who actually had to clean up the blood, and that's well documented. And actually even more upsetting is that they were sued by the landlord of the property for the damage to the property and new carpet. So I don't believe that for a minute.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time. In fact, we only got like a couple of minutes.
Okay.
What do you want to leave us with?
The Manson family is largely a mythological invention. I strongly believe that if Sharon Tate wasn't involved in this case, that we wouldn't be talking about this. This would just be a series of pretty ugly murders. the one interesting thing is that the Manson's sort of claim for some sort of success, in a perverse way, has been realised. He probably is the world's most famous living criminal. He's outlived everyone, so he got the celebrity of some sort that he wanted, but equally, I think that if you strip this story away and take the hysteria out of it, it's just a mediocre busker with influence over teenagers. The other thing which, is never really been documented is that no one of Manson's age really wanted anything to do with him. He's one of those characters who really, he'd been in prison half of his life. So, in a sense, it was a 32, 33-year-old man and his mind was 16, 17. So, in a sense, I think he was quite immature. But, once you throw celebrity into this, once you throw Hollywood into it, let's throw in the Beach Boys, the Beatles, let's throw Satan in, let's throw everything in. Then it elevates it to this crime of the century. But you take out some of those elements, and you're just left with another grubby murder, which happens in LA every single day. It's no different. The 60s wraps everything up in a golden glow. It could have, if it happened in the 80s, it wouldn't have the same glow as this, We had Woodstock just before, the Beatles, we had Summer of Love, all those Technicolor moments. And then Manson comes along at the end, it's like a pantomime. It's like the baddie turns up and ruins it all. And then after Manson, you have Altamont, the festival in San Francisco, which really, that again was another curtain puller over the decade. This will all, in the next 20 or 30 years, when all the original people are not with us, it will all go largely into mythology. It'll just be a story which will be regurgitated and rewritten and embellished, and no one around to check it. And it will become folklore. And when you have folklore, then the sky's the limit. It becomes. So it's just that. My attempt was just try and rationalise it, try and make some sense out of it, so that perhaps people in the future might go, it wasn't as fantastic in the literal sense of the word as it's been made out. It was just a pretty grubby scenario where a lot of people got hurt badly and made some very bad choices. So that's my take.
Simon Wells, author of Charles Manson Coming Down Fast. Once again, Simon, I can't thank you enough, man, for because making time for me today at the last minute too, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Good night. Okay, they got Simon Wells. Interesting take on the Charles Manson story. Charles Manson Coming Down Fast, friends with Timothy Wiley. What do we open up here? Okay, little can of worms there. Anyway, if you like this show, check out OppermanReport.com. What the heck is that? OppermanReport.com. And I'm working on a special, guys, right now for the members section, where if you want to sign up for a year, I'll give you 13 months for $65. We got robbed. They stole a very important camera that we've been using here, me and Victoria, in the house. So I'm trying to raise money over the weekend here to try and raise some funds to replace her camera for her. It was only a couple $100, but if you can become a member, $65, 13 months. 13 months, the mark of the beast in honor of Kenneth Anger. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, Simon Wells, Charles Manson Coming Down Fast, and I really do, all kidding aside, want to thank Simon Wells for making time for me, because it was a real scramble to fill up time this week. And I contacted a bunch of people, and it turned out I did twice as many shows as I needed to do. But Simon Wells is a very kind man to make time for me. I know it's very late over there in the UK as we're filming this, recording this right now. So thank you so much, Simon Wells, Charles Manson, Coming Down Fast. OppermanReport.com is where the member section is. And you want to get a special deal.